In this video we're going to be looking at positive externalities, or transactions that have positive benefits or positive social benefits for third parties. Okay, just before we do that though, I just wanted to quickly finish off by explaining why climate change is a market failure. So, climate change is considered a market failure. It represents a negative externality in both production and consumption. Okay, it occurs because when we do things, it creates excessive carbon emissions as a result of production and consumption. So goods releasing carbon into the atmosphere, which is having negative impacts, and this is the negative externality. Extreme weather events, rising sea levels, which ultimately leads to real economic and social costs in the future, e.g. loss of tourism, rising sea levels, poorer living standards. The cost of current consumption and production are externalized, so we don't care about them basically, onto future generations or third parties, with the current generation not absorbing these costs without the government intervening, leading to an over-allocation or inefficient allocation of resources. So keywords, goods are over-allocated because we don't take into account the third-party costs and explaining what these third-party costs are. And it's also important to explain that it's a negative externality in production and consumption, in both producing goods and consuming things like driving cars, consuming electricity. For this video, we're going to be looking at positive externalities. Positive externalities can occur in both consumption or production, and they have a benefit to a third party. These positive externalities are underallocated because we don't consider the third party benefits. Okay, so something like education is not underallocated because we don't do it enough because for our own interest. It's underallocated because we're not thinking of the benefits for society of a more educated society. So for example, the fact that there'll be less crime, or that we'll be paying tax for the rest of our lives and the government will benefit from that. So they're the third party benefits that we don't care about when we go to school, and therefore not enough people get an education and the government steps in. Okay, so some positive externalities in production. When we invest in research and development is a really key one. So if we invest in research and development into this new drug that's going to cure heart disease or cancer or something beneficial for society, then third parties are clearly going to benefit from that. Anybody with cancer, anybody with heart disease is going to benefit from that production. So that has massive third party benefits. When we train our employees, is another example. Okay, it gets a more educated society, more tax for the government. It helps them in their future. But they're some of the positive externalities that can occur when we train our employees. They're better citizens that generate more income and pay more tax. Positive externalities in consumption. If you landscape your garden, great, that's good for your person next door. Okay, I'll come back to education. Public transport, less negative externalities, or less people are using petrol, so providing public transport can have benefits for the future generations. And that's the same with converting your car to gas or using water tanks. It's about preserving the environment and impact. It's going to benefit third parties. Another really good one in consumption is vaccinating your children. Vaccinating your children is great because it's going to make them healthier, but it's going to make them less likely to infect all the other kids at kindergarten as well. So that would have massive third-party benefits that we may not consider in the private transaction. And education is a really important one. Okay? Education, don't say that the third-party benefits or the positive externality is that you'll be more educated and you'll get a better job. You're part of the transaction. The positive externality is the fact that you will be less likely to commit crime. Okay? Societies with very uneducated societies, partly because they need to steal to get food in some instances, are likely to have more crime. And you'll be paying more tax, so the government will love you as well. And that's the positive externality. Merit goods, really important with the definition of merit goods. Merit goods are goods and services that are highly desirable, and it is felt that everyone should have access to them, but they are not provided in sufficient quantities by a free market. So education is not a public good. Okay, education would be provided by a free market. Okay, it'd be expensive, but some people would pay, so the private market would make those goods and services, or would provide education. But it's not going to be provided in sufficient quantities. Not enough people will get an education to maximize the efficiency for society. Education will be highly underallocated. So merit goods are provided by a free market, but they're not in the levels that are necessary to maximize efficiency. And therefore, how do we intervene? The government? The government steps in and makes public schools, provides public schools. They subsidise government schools. So government, even even, it's not government schools, they subsidise private schools. So private schools would be a lot more expensive without this government intervention. They also have a minimum school leaving age. All of these things try and maximise education and increase the level to the more socially optimal level. Okay, so a subsidy on education, for example, assuming it's given to the consumer, is going to shift the demand curve to the right. It'll make schooling cheaper, so we'll demand more at any given price, and it'll ensure that the benefits for society are taken into account when we produce and consume the goods. And we get a more socially efficient allocation of resources because more people are going to school, and therefore we can benefit from those positive externalities. Other ways that the government can promote socially desirable production: direct production. Okay, so some things like public schools, subsidising private schools, all those things are ways that the government can promote socially desirable production. Research grants, so giving companies money to invest in medicine, to invest in certain areas that are going to benefit society, are going to increase production. And legislation is another way that we can increase resources being allocated to goods with positive externalities. So laws mandating consumption of certain goods, like bike helmets, minimum school leaving ages, or the idea of all of that is to ensure that the level of production is at a level that's maximising society's living standards. Okay, so the aim of government intervention is to shift the allocation of resources by changing the relative price. Fewer resources are allocated to the production of goods with negative externalities, and more will be allocated to the production of goods with positive externalities, e.g. reduction in cigarette consumption because it's taxed and increased production costs, and therefore lead to less hospital visits, less bills, less impacts on third parties. So, don't know what happened then. So to sum up, positive externalities are under-allocated in a free market because we don't take into account the third-party benefits. Government steps in and helps, either provides these directly or subsidises production or has minimum school leaving ages to try and get it up to the socially optimal level. Okay? The positive externality of schooling will be discussed even more in the next video.